Meet Hassan. He's 2 years old. Any child who needs food as much as him is one too many. There aren't a lot of children at this therapeutic feeding center in Mao, 6 to 8 at any one time. But that's what's worrying aid agencies like the World Food Program. Just 24 kilometers away, in Tukuli, prospects for an entire generation are measured in centimeters. Some 400 mothers and children have come to this supplementary feeding center for food being distributed by WFP. Random checks are showing too many severely malnourished children. Fatima is 5, and the red means she should be in a hospital. So should 1-year-old Kubra and Secharis. The World Health Organization considers a 15% childhood malnutrition rate an emergency. Here in western Chad, it's typically around 26%. Suleiman Mahamet is 1 year old. The food he has been getting here is not enough, and he needs to go to the hospital in Mao. His mother Fatima is 30. Survival for her and her family is a full-time job, and her husband is visiting his family for Ramadan, leaving her and her mother to take care of their 7 children. It's no easy task, since every day wood must be gathered for cooking and water fetched from a well at the health center 5 kilometers away by donkey. Like most people in the Sahel, the Mahamets are subsistence farmers, and the food they grow during the short rainy season must last them the whole year. It's a race against time, since food from the previous year's harvest frequently runs out while the new crop is growing.
Last year's drought caused a poor harvest and we run out of food. We hope this year will be better.
It's the lean season here in the Sahel, but you'd never know it from these lush fields. For 9 months of the year, it's desert, up to 50 degrees in the sweltering heat. There are few roads or power lines. Running water is a novelty in rural areas of the Sahel. These nomads are heading south to better pastures as the desert advances from drought. Those who struggle to work the land or tend livestock are finding it harder and harder to survive. At the therapeutic feeding center in Mao, many of the severely malnourished children who have managed to come here from the surrounding villages will become healthy again. But the first 2 years of life are the most critical. They may never fully recover physically and mentally. The food Suleiman will receive here can save his life, and since these pictures were taken, he has already shown improvement. But the window of opportunity is small. It's critical that mothers like Fatima bring their malnourished babies here for help.
Women come from up to 40 kilometers away and must stay here with their babies for several weeks. WFP encourages mothers to come by feeding them too, while their babies are at the center.
Even charging your cell phone is a challenge here. As the people of the Sahel peer hopefully into the 21st century, the challenges to those living on the edge become greater and greater. For Hungry Planet, I'm Jonathan Dumont.
This is Aurore, the last and most remote of 33 low-lying islands that make up the Republic of Kiribati in the South Pacific. Scientists say that in the next 30 to 50 years, islands like this one will be underwater due to rising sea levels caused by global climate change. So what are people doing here now to prepare for a day when their country no longer exists? Bob Sorum is building a seawall to protect his house. While most of his neighbors have moved inland, he's determined to stay put. But for how long? One conservative estimate from the University of Colorado predicts that global temperature changes will cause sea levels to rise as much as 2 meters by the end of this century. For Kiribasa's 100,000 residents who live on narrow strips of land just barely above sea level, it's a trend that spells disaster, says the country's president, Anote Tong.
Already we have whole villages being washed out, that the sea is rising. There is no running away from that reality.
As conditions worsen, Tong says many here, like 23-year-old fisherman Rubita Yobite, are finding it harder to produce the food they need to survive.
It's getting hotter, which is affecting the food we grow. Before, our coconuts were big, but now they're as small as our fists.
Coconuts are Kiribasa's chief export. As they shrink in size and number, poverty is growing. Despite these pressures, Tong resists the idea of moving people off the islands en masse.
Having lost our homeland, having lost our cultural identity, I don't think we want to lose our dignity.
In what little time they have left, Tong plans to develop some of the islands and give his people the means to leave on their own accord.
The idea is to encourage the development of the outer islands. We just need to be able to provide them with the opportunity, the skill, and whatever equipment they need.
But convincing development organizations to invest in a country that won't be around in 50 years is not easy. For the first time, the UN agency specializing in agricultural development, IFAD, sends a team to assess the situation on Kiribasa's most remote southern island, Arore.
We would like to understand some of the challenges that you face with the environment.
There has been a lot of damage to trees. Wells are salty. There is erosion along the coastline.
The President of the country is saying that the whole survival of the islands over the next 50 years is in question. A challenge that we face is what happens in the course of this 50 years.
The IFAD team helps islanders develop a plan, one that tackles some of their most immediate problems, like the intrusion of seawater, but also breaks new ground for those living on the front lines of climate change. This agricultural research center has been set up to help islanders produce food locally. The aim is to identify food crop varieties able to tolerate rising temperatures and grow in salty water. It's Tong's goal to turn islands like Arore into centers for food production, growing crops that could help feed populations in places where the impact of climate change is advancing much more quickly. But these are just temporary measures. Tong says the real challenge is to make those countries contributing to climate change take responsibility for its effects.
This represents the single biggest moral challenge to humankind. And if it doesn't respond to this, then there is no credibility to anything.
For Hungry Planet, I'm James here.
Danon ha portato in vantaggio Haiti al primo minuto del secondo tempo.
نتيجة المباراة للأنزوري رأي آخر.
Apolo Internacional da Alessandro apareceu para receber, capaz da ligação na direita, bom lançamento para Neymar.
Carasso était bien parti là, cette fois il n'était pas loin du tout.
Mais de toute façon pour l'instant les gardiens choisissent.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo.
The food situation is of grave concern in parts of the Sahel, with more than 10 million people at risk of hunger. In Burkina Faso, harvests are meager, livestock pastures are dry, and with consistently high prices for food and farming inputs, levels of hunger and poverty are rising. Fatimata Nabayogo lives in Poa, 65 kilometers west of the capital. She is pregnant with her first child, but there are already 23 mouths to feed in this family.
I get the water. I collect wood from the bush. And I mill the millet to make porridge. After the morning meal, that's it. There's nothing else until the next day.
FAO and the European Union have been working together since June 2009 to boost production and improve food security in Burkina Faso. The €18 million program is benefiting 860,000 vulnerable households.
Et pour booster la production, il y a un certain nombre de facteurs sur lesquels il faut jouer.
We are working on some key factors to boost production, like training farmers in modern production techniques.
Notamment la fourniture d'engrais pour que les sols qui sont
We are distributing inputs because a bit of fertilizer really helps plants reach their potential. And most importantly, we supply improved seeds for all the small farms here on the plateau.
The primary long-term aim is to create a sustainable system of multiplication and certification of good quality, locally adapted seeds. But the project also includes work on capacity building, institutional and technical support, research and training, as well as efforts to build up local infrastructure. For some, the current crisis might even turn into an opportunity. Seed producers in irrigated areas are now able to improve their revenues and contribute to improved food security around the country.
Des zones à forte capacité comme ça vont pouvoir compenser justement.
Areas like this, with high production levels, can compensate for the next season in vulnerable provinces which don't produce as much, which lack seeds and which are facing food insecurity.
Donc une partie de cette production de Banzon, comme d'autres périmètres dans
So part of this production from Banzon and other areas goes to the high-risk areas to fill the deficit.
Pour essayer justement de combler ces problèmes de déficit.
Distributions of improved seed for the next planting season will give 100,000 vulnerable households the chance of a better harvest. This is Boudica Downs for Hungry Planet.